Hello, my name is Bridget Reed, and my project is called Freeze It: How Smart Freezing Can Cut Waste and Save Cash. Okay, let's start by looking at the big problem, which is food waste. Nationwide, we waste about 1/3 of all food we produce, and food waste in the home is the biggest contributor to this. So not only is it just wasting food, but it's also wasting your time and money. This waste most often comes from food spoiling before it gets used. The average household wastes about $1,500 worth of food every year. And with the average salary being about $55,000 a year, that's 3% of your income going towards simply just throwing food away. Groceries are very expensive, and throwing food away is just like throwing money right into the garbage. So, by learning better ways to store food, you can save a lot of money throughout the years. So, here I'm going to show some smart freezer techniques that can help stretch your grocery budget um, and reduce waste. Freezing is one of the best tools we have to fight the issue of food waste because freezing pauses bacteria growth, which is why freezing drastically extends shelf life of food. Take bread, for example. Bread lasts about a week on the counter versus in the freezer, it lasts 6 months. I know personally, when I leave bread on the counter, I never make it through the whole loaf before it goes bad and gets moldy and I have to throw it out. However, since I started storing it in the freezer, I'm able to finish the entire loaf and I spend much less money on bread. So I think it's important to cover what cannot freeze. Well, most things can freeze. There are some things that don't do very well in the freezer. There are some vegetables that should not be frozen, and that includes celery, lettuce, cucumbers, and raw tomatoes. They just become mushy, and watery. Another thing is like cream-based sauces, like mayonnaise and sour cream. The texture becomes kind of undesirable. Similarly with soft cheeses like ricotta and cream cheese, along with yogurt, and then fresh potatoes. You can totally freeze like cooked potatoes. You can cook them any kind of way and freeze them. So if you have potatoes going bad soon, just make mashed potatoes and freeze them for a meal later on. But fresh potatoes specifically will become grainy. So make sure to cook them before putting them in the freezer. And then one thing I think is important to mention is liquids expand when they freeze. So anything canned, the can will warp or it could even explode depending on how full it is. So anything canned liquids, they should not be in the freezer. All right. One of my favorite ways to save money with the freezer is by buying in bulk. I used to buy chicken individually for about $5 a pound. But then I started going to Costco and buying 10 pounds of chicken breast for about $30. And I found I do go through about 10 pounds a month. So by buying it in bulk instead of individually, I save about $20 a month. And that comes to about $250 every single year. And so just with chicken alone, I save $250 a year. Another thing I do is I freeze like leftover ingredients, like vegetable scraps, or if you have like vegetables going bad soon. In this photo here, I have a couple bell peppers that were going south, and I just chopped them up and put them in a freezer safe bag. And then I just stick them in my omelets in the morning. Same thing, whenever I have bananas going bad, I peel them and put them in a freezer safe bag, and I can just put them in my smoothies instead of throwing them in the garbage. Another thing I like to do is leftover herbs. I put them in ice cube trays with oil and I freeze them. And once they are fully frozen, I take them out of the ice cube tray and put them in a freezer safe bag. And I have herbs and I don't have to buy them every time I'm going to cook a new recipe with fresh herbs. Meal prep using the freezer is very beneficial because you can meal prep for weeks out instead of just a couple of days. So if you have a lot of busy days, you're going to run out of meal prep, even if you do meal prep at the beginning of the week. Um, for example, here I have breakfast burritos. Uh, I find myself I'm in a rush a lot of mornings, and I used to go to Starbucks and go through the drive-through to get breakfast. But now that this is even more convenient, I just pop a burrito in the microwave, and it saves me about $10 on those mornings that I'm in a rush and don't have time to cook breakfast. I also freeze leftover dinners, especially soup. I normally make big batches of soup in a crock pot, even though my household is only two people and I have a bunch of leftovers. So on busier nights, I can just warm up microwave soup from the freezer instead of ordering DoorDash or Uber Eats. So, some common mistakes to avoid when using the freezer, the biggest one I would say is freezer burn. And this is just caused by air exposure in the freezer and is easily avoidable by just ensuring that you are using airtight freezer safe containers and removing excess air before freezing. Another thing is making sure not to overload the freezer. Air needs to circulate in order to keep everything frozen evenly. Also, not rotating items. I've kind of found myself doing this before, kind of like forgetting what's in there, and then stuff kind of sits in there for like 6+ months, and then at that point, it kind of can become freezer burn and go bad. So just making sure you're using the first in, first out method, and make sure you label your bags so you know what is older to keep your supply fresh. So you have different options for freezer storage material. So here's a little comparison. You can use plastic wrap or like aluminum foil. These are really affordable options. However, neither of them are very durable. They can tear easy. Um, they're good for like more short time use. You also cannot store anything liquid or anything that could leak with these. So you're a little limited with these options. And then you have the Ziploc freezer bags. They're very durable. You can hold liquids in them. but they're a little bit more on the expensive side, about $10 a box. However, these are all three of these are single use. So that brings me to the reusable freezer bags. While they are an expensive upfront cost, they will save you money over time, and they're eco-friendly and reusable and can also hold liquids. About $25 for a set of these. I did a little personal case study. One week I did no freezer use, and the second week I used the smart freezer tips. The first week I threw out 3 meals of leftovers. I had 1 bag of spinach go bad and 2 spoiled bananas. And I needed to get last minute takeout 3 times, once for breakfast, twice for dinner. So this, with the food waste and the takeout costs, it costed me about $75. Whereas in the second week, I froze all my leftovers, so I was able to use those for lunches. I froze my spinach before it went bad, and I had a banana that I froze as well that I used for smoothies in the morning instead of just throwing that out. And I was did not need to order any takeout because I always had food in the fridge on my busier nights. Estimated savings about $75. Over the course of the month, I save a little under $400. And over the course of a year, over $3,000 in savings by using this smart freezer tips. Just wrapping up here. In conclusion, freezers help cut costs of groceries and reduce food waste. Proper storage means fewer spoiled items and more money in your pocket. These small changes, like buying in bulk, portioning, and planning, make a big difference in sticking to your grocery budget. Freezing isn't just about saving food, it's about saving your time and your money. Thank you for listening to my presentation.